Hello. This podcast risks becoming a stranger in its own studio, as I am outnumbered by Critic associate editors. There are two here today, Patrick Porter and Chris Bayliss, and I don't care if they came here legally, they have to go back. Speaking of going back, England have returned home from their Ashes series down under after a very sound, very firm thrashing, where they were lucky to come away with even one test win. England's failure comes despite promises that this was the best prepared England side of all time, and that their swashbuckling form of cricket was the only way forward, and to quote England captain Ben Stokes, the landscape of cricket has changed. And we're here to discuss a sparkling piece from Patrick on Bazball. And Patrick, I understand you also write about international relations, is that true?
Occasionally.
So I thought this was a wonderful piece when I read it. And I just want to kind of kick off by reading a very short section from it. Revolutions often repudiate the past and look to defy time itself, sweeping away old borders and despising hard-won traditions. Rather than standing on the shoulders of giants, they try to create a new man above the rubble.
Got a bit carried away.
Yeah. How did you manage to conjure such sparkling prose from such a terrible series?
Well, you got to do something. Well, I couldn't help but notice the way the captain, Ben Stokes, and the coach, McMullen, would talk about the past and their forebears in such contemptuous ways. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to say we want to try something different. That's normal. It's another thing to say, be gone with the past. It's year zero. We're saving cricket. Mm-hmm. And to talk about people like Alistair Cook or Michael Vaughan or even Geoffrey Boycott as kind of nothing but has-beens to be dismissed. And that really, I thought, A, that's unwise, because you're missing out on a lot of inherited wisdom that you can build on, but B, it's also a little bit sinister. And it sounds like, in the political world, what revolutions sound like when they begin. Mm-hmm. And I thought in the kind of the less violent world of cricket, it would lead to disaster. And here we are.
Interesting.
Where do you think this has come from? I mean, my sort of theory about it, half sketched out, was that this is the result of some university department fangled theory of sports psychology, probably borrowed from the Americans, and it's a theoretical model of how you have to think about things, and they've just tried to apply it in the real world, and it's just created this nonsense.
Yeah, there's something about that. I think there's also something very corporate. There's a sort of branding exercise out of control. I mean, listen to the language, the kind of pseudo-business language, the landscape of cricket, the brand, that they've kind of come up with this thing and gotten intoxicated on it. And it really becomes a kind of sort of self-regard to the point where you start to assume not only that you're different, but that you're almost entitled to something morally, despite the fact that you keep running up against bigger teams or other large teams who beat you. This is one of the problems. We keep hearing this talented group of players should have played better in Australia. Really? Talented? What's the evidence? They dropped 17 catches. They batted badly. They bowled badly. Quite a lot of tactical sort of errors. They seem to play well only against weaker sides, usually on home turf and curated ideal conditions.
Flat track bullies.
Yeah, and so I'm actually resisting that premise itself. I'm not sure they are that talented when it really counts.
Mm-hmm. I have kind of got the impression, actually, that it is covering for weakness.
Yeah,
I think proper Test cricket is an incredibly difficult art form, sport. Well, it's a combination of both, isn't it, frankly? And I think they have decided basically that they are not going to engage with that form of Test cricket because I think it is too difficult. And I think this almost gives them an opt-out. But I also think you're right. I think there is an element of they don't just think they're saving Test cricket, which is in, a terrible state of health. I think they think they're saving Test cricket itself, as well as England.
Yeah, I mean, that is partly the problem. And I mean, you have some people there who can do great things on a certain day in a certain hour, but Test cricket's about doing it over hours and hours and days and days. It's not just the one day out of 20 days in the series that you rescue a match. It's about sustainment. And there's also a sense of trying to cut the Gordian knot that in this very difficult art form of cricket, where England was doing very badly before Bazball, this sense they're going to kind of cut the Gordian knot, that they're going to wish away all the difficulties. I mean, I remember one of the things that one of their catch cries was, we're going to teach each other to play without pressure, take away the pressure. Now, saying you're going to take away pressure from professional Test cricket is like saying I'm going to take away getting wet from swimming. It is pressure. Yeah. That's why it's beautiful. Yeah. It is this real attritional test of your mettle, of your judgment, of your endurance, of your physical stamina, preparation. And what you ideally need in a Test side or any kind of sport is people who crave the pressure, who need the pressure, who feed off it, and to encourage that sort of resilience rather than making it all much easier. And by taking away pressure, you then take away accountability.
Yes.
And when you take away accountability, then you get this loose, cavalier cricket. And you could have had something else. You could have had a decision, we're going to play a more aggressive kind of cricket. I'm not going to say brand. Yeah. But as tradition would show, all forms of cricket have to adjust to circumstances. Sometimes you've got to dig in. Sometimes you've got to lash out. You've got to use prudence.
I do remember falling for it at the beginning of the previous Ashes series, and thinking that the first test of the last series, and I do remember that we lost it, but I felt, you know what, we might not have won that, but I thought that was an improvement on what we've seen before. Yeah. It was at least something worth watching. But they doubled down with that strategy of they'd bat first and declare, they'd have racked up a respectable total, but not what. If you're going to bat first, then there's absolutely there's no calculation, no possible incentive in declaring. If you rack up as many as you want, if you're short of time in the second innings, then you can declare whatever point you want, knowing how many the other team got in the first innings. But they just refused, and they were impervious to logic.
Yeah, and in a way, that everything you've just said was, in a sense, partly planting the seeds for defeat in Australia. That it's one thing to play a thriller, though not win back the Ashes in England in English conditions, where Bazball is most suited. You've got flatter tracks, you've got smaller grounds, less acreage. It's easier to blast the thing over the fence. It's another thing to then try and export that to India or Australia. Different conditions, bigger grounds, different wickets, different bowling, different velocity. I also remember that series. I must say, watching that, I do love Test cricket. I didn't enjoy that series, not just because of that stuff, but there's something about sort of one batsman just trying to hit everything for six and everyone else bowling short and on the averages until he holes out. I actually don't find that particularly compelling drama. It's like that. It's like what there was a football manager years ago who was asked, and he was playing a very dour football to try and survive and not get relegated, and some daffy journalist said to him, isn't this not very entertaining? He goes, you want to be entertained, you go and watch the clowns. There's something about sport where we should go beneath the thrill to kind of more compelling drama. For example, from my young life, my favourite example was Alan Donald versus Michael Atherton. Not many runs scored, but my God, you couldn't watch anything else. It was compelling. It was frightening to watch, the sheer intensity of it. But I remember Pat Cummins was interviewed in that series, and there was this sort of idea that England would kind of overwhelm everyone with their style and momentum. And they said to Pat Cummins, do you not feel England have taken back the momentum? And he said, no. Why not? It's 2-1. We're still ahead. We're just not that easily fazed by it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he is, I think you touched on a really interesting point, which was the lack of accountability. And I think we've seen, particularly in this series, a real lack of accountability. Not just, today, Luke Wright, who is the England cricket selector, has gone, but he's the only person. And on top of that, actually, there hasn't been much change in terms of the playing staff. So they have taken pressure away from the team basically by refusing to drop players who are not performing.
Yeah,
and I think that was terrible in Australia. There were a lot of players who should not have played past the third test.
Well, right, and I think this is where, to be a little bit more humble for once, this is where there's a kind of echo from Australia's own past of hubris and disaster. When Australia's kind of what became for a while an obnoxious, win at all costs, in your face arrogance, when that came undone in the kind of moral disastrous cheating in South Africa, big catch cry was what to do now, how are we going to change this? And for about 24 hours, Darren Lehman tried to say that he was going to be the one to fix it. Well, he'd been at the core of the culture. He'd, more than most people, had shaped that attitude and been complicit in it. And so to say that the arsonist, or one of the main arsonists, should be the one to turn around and tell you how to put out the fire, I think there's a similar thing. Obviously, it's not to do with cheating, it's to do with a reckless kind of cricket. But Brendan McCullum, to say that he's the one who should now be the agent of fundamental change, I just think that's misguided. He, more than most people, identified with the language of marriage. We're married to this way of playing. He said that after the first test. Okay, that's great. You can do that. But I think if the idea is no, we can't possibly cope without him, then you're not seriously committed to change.
Yeah. There was a moment in the last test. This sounds awful. There was a moment in that series where I was willing whitewash, because I found after the first two tests, I found the arrogance so distasteful and stifling.
Yeah.
Like, as an England fan, I felt I was the problem.
Yeah.
I actually would quite like England to win and play proper test cricket.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was being made into the problem. And so I was hoping they wouldn't win a test, because then they would have had no choice at that point.
There's a very large army of serious English cricket followers, including some of the poor souls who went out to Australia and even missed out on some of the day's tickets they had because it was so short. There's a lot of serious English cricket supporters who wanted something a bit more prudent and a bit more serious in their own cricket. So I don't see this necessarily as the Bazball phenomenon as some expression of some popular will for something. I think there's a lot of people who always had reservations about it and thought there comes a time when you have to pull back a little bit the high risk prone, particularly the batting, and try something else at least for a session. So I think we probably shouldn't associate Bazball with English cricket. I think this is a particular thing that happened in English cricket.
It's an aberration.
There's a much wider world of English cricket. I mean, I'm speaking to two of the converted, I imagine. But,
No, I also wonder whether there's an element of generational politics going on in there. I think that there's a contrast with what went before, particularly looking back at the kind of Flintoff era, and the excesses off the field, and thinking back to them sort of stumbling out of Downing Street after the victory in 2005
with Kevin Peterson's frosted tips. One of those 2000s photos I could possibly imagine.
But I wonder if there's sort of a bit of millennial piety going.
Yes.
And that's why this sort of corporate sort of fanaticism, in contrast to that previously the Gen X players and the mixture of hedonism and doggedness, that it feels.
So almost
they were putting it in the past.
Almost like a company that has doggedly pursued woke policies.
I
think maybe we're stretching that a bit too far.
I think there was a lot of that sort of superficiality and self-regard. I mean, the bucket hats and the kind of congratulating themselves because they're talking about their emotions and how hard it is to be men under pressure, and the sort of and celebrating the inflexibility of what they were doing. Like, this is what we are. This is our essence. Come on, mate. Well, you're here representing other people. You're here representing not just yourselves. You're actually, there are a lot of English cricket followers who have to talk to people like me in the pub and feel better about what they're doing and not listen to my nonsense. That you're representing them as well. And it became a bit unfalsifiable for a while as well. So when England were doing well under the new dispensation, they said, look, it works. It's great. when they weren't doing well, when they were getting beaten, oh, well, at least we're playing entertaining cricket.
Yeah.
So there was no way in their own minds they could be persuaded maybe this is not ideal.
Yeah, I wonder if at some point they will, as a kind of defense mechanism, they will develop a system like the Stalinist show trials, where they accuse people of wrecking. Like there'll be a particular player who was accused of sabotage because he's dug in for 3 overs instead of
the anti-party faction.
It was interesting that one of these signature moments of Bazball, which was a real thing, they might say they don't like the label, but they revelled in the very specific idea of it.
Oh, God.
There was a moment where Ben Stokes was even dismissive of Sir Alistair Cook, one of the greatest opening batsmen and test batsmen in our time. 12,000 runs, averaging 45 against some of the best bowling in the world, and some hard tracks, including in India where he went and won. And he said, no, he just wouldn't make it. He said, in this day and age. Now, I think in this day and age, England could have done with an Alistair Cook and an Ian Bell, people who could bloody-mindedly grind the Aussies down when they had a lead, to actually take their time and gradually put their foot on our throats. They really needed those kinds of batsmen at a certain moment. So to kind of throw that away and say, no, I'd rather have, Duckett, etc. I mean, if you're going to throw away your own heritage like that, then you are going to lose 4.
And it wasn't as if they were facing a particularly formidable Australian side it was.
I think they made them look formidable.
Yeah.
I think there were 4 formidable players in an otherwise not bad, not great 11. Yeah. Sometimes in sport that's enough, of course. It's small clusters of genius, but yeah, absolutely. The expectation was, with Australia ravaged by injuries, with a lot of kind of players debuting, that they would have a better shot. But Alex Carey, in particular for me, was one of the most important creatures, apart from the fact that he could survive all the abuse after Lords. The fact that he went up and stood up to the stumps. So, you're not get to play your game with just dancing around at will. No, we're gonna do a counter move here. And England, we're not ready for that. But yeah, you would have thought they could have put on a better show. But I go back to my earlier point. I'm still not persuaded that this was a particularly talented squad going to Australia in the first place.
No, again, I think there are probably 3 or 4.
Yeah.
A bit like Australia, 3 or 4 very, very talented players in somebody like Stokes. But very clearly the system does not work.
Yeah. Well, England, I think, and this is where we get to the thing you started with, the problem in Test cricket generally, and English Test cricket in particular. It depends how you diagnose it. For the kind of the Bazball era, it's, we weren't adventurous enough in our tactics, and that's what's wrong with cricket. No, cricket has a mass audience before that. If there's a problem in English cricket, it's that, quite aside from anything else, there's not enough professional cricketers in England. Mm-hmm. Like, England's a much larger country population-wise than Australia, but fewer professional cricketers. It's got a smaller a pool of talent it's drawing from compared to the Aussies. Mm-hmm. Cricket is a more peripheral pursuit for various reasons in this country. One of the great things about 2005 Ashes as a contest was that it was on BBC. It was free to air. It wasn't behind paid firewall. So it became the ambient part of the summer, even for people who didn't usually follow cricket. It became a national thing.
The issue with cricket in terms of that is that it's a victim of its own peripherality, in that the sort of people who watch cricket on the television really don't watch a great deal amount of TV, which means that they are an extremely lucrative market to sell advertising.
Very much so, yeah. Very much so.
Which is going to the pressure that then puts to put it onto commercial television. But you could put it onto one of the free to air commercial stations. Nothing stopping you from doing that.
Yeah,
yeah, and it became a real national thing. And we've got to try and find a way of just getting more English people playing cricket. It's easier said than done. But England is a major Test nation and a highly populated state with a relatively large economy with a pretty small cricket world.
Yeah, I think it'd probably be quite interesting to draw parallels to other kind of examples of. I really like the term year zero thinking in terms of thinking about Bazball. I think that's a really good way of presenting it, because it's like nothing has ever come before.
Yeah.
And also nothing that's come before is of any use. Yeah. I mean, the trashing of Alistair Cook. Alistair Cook was my favourite player growing up. I thought he was absolutely fantastic. I just loved that.
Lovely guy as well.
Yeah, I just loved that grit and that determination, and I love that. And I think year zero is a very good way of putting it. And I think it's we were talking about this before we went on. It's a bit like Moneyball in baseball, isn't it? Which is now completely taken over baseball. And it's increasingly, I think it's also taken over basketball.
What's Moneyball?
So Moneyball is basically a way of approaching baseball solely through statistics.
Yeah.
So it was with the Oakland
Athletics, yeah. So,
in the 2000s, I think.
Yep, early 2000s.
Basically, Oakland Athletics, very, very small market team, which means they don't have a big wage capacity.
Yep.
And they had quite a good team. I think they got to the playoffs the previous year, and they had to basically get rid of 4 or 5 of their best players because they could no longer afford them. And so
they were going to free agency.
Yeah. So the basically because they could not afford to replace those players, what they did was adopt a new method that just looked at the statistics of the players. And basically, they're focused on base percentage. So it's the percentage of appearances in at bats at which you get to onto base. And they recreated those players basically. That recreated the players they lost in the aggregate by bringing in players who got on base a lot. But it was very interesting because they bought a lot of no-name players who had very poor careers. They brought in a really weird pitcher because he had
Chad Billingsworth, I think. Yes.
Yeah. He had some insane
unorthodox action.
Yeah, it came from like down here rather than being held.
So it was. It's one of those classic tales of the geeks, the geeks getting their revenge against the jocks. So in the sort of early 21st century, there was this built-up resentment of the old school of baseball. That was very much the eye test, scouting intensive, but also which had become intellectually corrupted by various prejudices. Like, does someone, for example, is a player good-looking? Because if they're good-looking, they're confident. If they're confident, then they can take pressure.
Yeah.
Or does a player have a certain strange action, which means they're not going to be any good? Or an overvaluing of batting average as opposed to getting on base. And so, it was, in a sense, there was a kind of welcome correction where they said, well, actually, let's try and take all those prejudices out of it and let's look at what works, which is not just that, but if you're a poor team, like the Oakland Athletics were and are, we're going to find inefficiencies in the market that we're going to exploit. We're going to bring in undervalued players who should be worth a lot more, bring them in, and then we'll outperform. And like a lot of these things, there's kind of two cheers. It was a correction that was needed, but then it became a sort of cultish thing in itself, where people started dismissing the whole scouting world, dismissing the eye test, fetishizing certain stats. One of the problems was the big teams like Boston Red Sox, who have many more resources, noticed this because they're not stupid, and they started hiring similar guys. And all of a sudden, those undervalued things became valued and then overvalued. So you had to then adjust.
The same as any target. The moment that people start monitoring it, it stops being a useful metric.
Right. And then it also turned out that it's quite difficult to kind of quantify some things which are obviously important. Like, for example, a big debate forever in baseball about the value of stealing, high risk, high reward, stealing bases. And the original, what do they call themselves, sabermetricians, the stats guys, made the argument, Billy Bean, it's inefficient. It costs you much more than it gains you at the time. Better just not to steal at all. And it became kind of this dogmatism.
Yeah.
But then others argued, well, it may be the case in that strict, narrow way, but if you're the pitcher and you've got a very, very, very fast guy at first base who's threatening the whole time to steal, that puts huge constraints on your ability to pitch well, because you're nervous about putting in a slow pitch that gives them a chance to steal. And all of a sudden, it distracts and exhausts the pitcher, and actually has its indirect effect. But it's very hard to put that on a spreadsheet. And all of a sudden, now Billy Bean years later is now ironically converted to the virtues of aggressive stealing.
Is it really?
Yeah, and one of the problems that came out of this as well, there's a great book about this called The Beauty of Short Hops, arguing that actually unpredictability is the beauty of baseball, arguing that there is no single way to win. That also, you look at the sides that have won the World Series, like Test cricket, there's all sorts of different pathways to victory.
Yeah.
And there's no one final essence. You find it through the stats and then you master it. It's more dynamic than that.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, that was a long answer. But
No. I think that's really interesting. You're also starting to see it infiltrate football now.
right.
So I think, is it Hearts or Aberdeen? One of the two are now at the top of the Scottish Premier League, and they've adopted that. And so you're going to see a lot more stats, I think, in football now.
Yeah, there was a fascinating interview about this, but with, I can't say his name, but it's Cesc Fabregas.
Yeah.
Manages, I think, or at least managed Como in Italy. And
Yes.
he made a really interesting signal. He said, I like the data, but I wanted to use my eyes because I want to look at a player very specifically when the side is losing and what their demeanour is. And it's very hard to model that, but I need to see what he's like psychologically and in his terms of his appearance when the heat is really on. And so I need to supplement the stats with the old school.
Yeah. I think that brings us back to Bazball quite nicely, because another one of the metrics that Moneyball misses out is clutch plays.
Right.
So you have some players in baseball that are just phenomenal in the postseason, and their stats in the normal season are usually pretty good, much better than the average player, and then in the postseason they just take a massive jump up. And there are certain players that you really want in a high pressure situation, and you can't measure that in metrics at all. You can't measure how a player performs under that.
And the sample sizes are limited too. So
the sample size is like once, twice, 4 times a season.
You play 165 games and you play 3 games and afterwards, and it's hard to,
Yeah. And I think that's, again, to bring that back to Bazball, that's something that Bazball just doesn't have. There is no acknowledgement of the pressure that these players are placed under.
It was interesting. I mean, exactly that. Sticking with the eye sort of test, I remember watching some of the tests, and I couldn't help but notice just how spent and exhausted early on England's bowlers were.
Yeah,
like in the first 2 tests, partly because their batsmen didn't give them much time, but they still should have been better conditioned. Mm-hmm. And I can't prove it, but you can just tell what a very tired person looks like. The bowlers, they hadn't put the miles in their legs to do it.
No. And don't forget, this was the best prepared England side of all time.
Yeah. Yes. Just as long as you say it, that makes it true. They needed months out in the country playing on hard pitches against, sort of tough local sides under a blistering sun.
And they spent much time in Australia before the series began?
Not a lot, no. No, I think they'd done a one-day thing in New Zealand, a tournament in New Zealand or something.
That's not the same, then.
Not the same. No, it's the thing, exactly. But
may as well be in the south of England.
They were offered games and they turned them down because they were offered a game after the first test because it finished so quickly.
I mean, understandably,
you don't need it.
Understandably, the one thing I sort of do understand is they wanted to watch the match loads of Jofra Archer very carefully, and I understand with Archer, but they still needed to be toughened up beforehand, and to get to that point, and you've had about 6 days cricket, and you need to go drinking in Noosa. Now, one thing we do know from English tours to Australia, once they start getting on the gas, and the Australians don't get on the gas during the series, it rarely ends well. Yeah. Flintoff has told us all about what it was like for his side. So to get halfway through and actually go on to alcohol at a time when professional sportsmen and women are not drinking alcohol during tournaments, I think that's quite a serious lapse.
And it doesn't relax when you put English people into a hot climate that they're not used to, and they start getting on the spuzz. It's
mad dogs and it was bad, and that became such an exhibition because all these Australian citizens just being able to watch them relax and film them it just became a circus.
Yeah, I think
increasing the pressure, not decreasing the pressure.
Yeah, I think the existence of social media has probably made that problem a lot worse than it was previously. Because previously it was, grainy footage from, I'm sure you remember Nokia N95s and things like that. You definitely remember them, Patrick.
I do. I miss it.
We should probably talk about international relations at some point, shouldn't we?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
I just to go back to something you wrote again as part of the piece.
Yeah.
Accelerated demolitions of the status quo often involve a wanton assault on history. Overthrowing existing ways of doing things can bring a certain dangerous exhilaration at the very process of burning down legacy institutions with all their riches and liquidating their defenders. The past is rotten. the present heroic, the future is radiant. Can you think of any other world leaders that might apply to, other than Brendan McCullum?
One or two, yeah. I think it is a thing. I mean, this is where I reveal my sort of Scrutonian reactionary version of conservatism.
That's the end of the free section of the Critic Show, but the conversation goes on. If you'd like to hear the full episode, subscribe at outpoststudios.net.